Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everybody, and once again, it is time for the Pelicans Podcast, the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A little saddened as I'm looking through my video screen on my laptop, and I see Jim, and I see the graph back in Nashville. I'm in New Orleans, but I had stuff to do, guys. I had to get the arena ready for Monday's preseason opener. Graph and Jim, I think I sent you the photos too. Todd, I sent you the photos of the floor. It is done. The arena is set to go. The radio booth is ready to go. Everything is ready to go to play some basketball. And I'm going to be honest with you. It's kind of cool to see, man, seeing, the graphics being rolled out there and everything. And all that needs to be said is, play some basketball, man. But it's there. It's right around the corner, man.
No, it's hard to believe you go through the whole off season and, now the week of training camp, and all of a sudden training camp's over and boom, you're playing a game. So no, it's great. I was actually kind of jealous of you, Gus, being in the arena yesterday and seeing all the all the paraphernalia out there and the radio location, section 112 with the WWL banner. And it's really starting to hit that we're going to have a broadcast on Monday and preseason is going to start and the regular season is just around the corner.
Yeah, now I might have sat in your seat, and I might have sat in your seat as well, Jim. But we're going to get into what y'all going to want to see when y'all sit in y'all's seats on Monday with that preseason opener and the preseason. But let's get to, I guess, the bit of the news of the end of the week and weekend as camp ramps up. We'll also talk about our overall thoughts as the team leaves Nashville and comes back to New Orleans this weekend. But Trey Murphy, the team announcing suffered hamstring injuries, could be reevaluated in 3 weeks. You look at the calendar, you look at the timetable, Jim, that kind of puts it around the start of the regular season. And I get it for people that aren't there, for fans. Here we go again. Players are injured. Oh no, Trey, when is he coming back? I don't know, maybe if I'm wrong, maybe because I was there with you guys. There's a lot of shooting. There's a lot of season to be played. And as I keep saying, Jim, this team hopes to be playing basketball the week before the NFL draft. That's mid-April. You know what I'm saying? So when you think of it like that, there's a long season to go. Would I like him to be healthy? Of course. But it's like, get healthy. We'll see you soon enough, man. I don't know. How do you feel about the Trey Murphy news?
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing from the standpoint of, for the team overall, but him specifically, the fact that he missed the beginning part of last season, and it feels like it's pretty much unavoidable that he's going to maybe miss at least a little bit of the beginning of the regular season because the 3-week time period is right around the opener. And that's just for him to be re-examined, and they'll take a look at it and see what progress he's made. So it's not like he's coming back for sure in 3 weeks. Hopefully he won't miss too much of the beginning of the regular season. But from a glass half full standpoint, though, I think if you compare how things are right now to last season, this is much better. Hopefully, like I said, he won't be out that long. The beginning of last season, they went into, late October with multiple players destined to be out for weeks. Jose Alvarado had a late start to the regular season. Najee missed some games at the beginning of, in October and November. And then Trey didn't come back until December 1st was his season debut. So, yeah, it stinks that he's going to be sidetracked a little bit. It felt like last season that injury prevented him from really getting into a groove. And it seemed like a couple times he was really hitting his stride, but overall it seemed like he never was able to get back to a lot of what we saw in his second season in the NBA.
And that's a great point that Jim just brought up, because last year this team suffered injuries, but it was different than in seasons past. They came back, and I think the team managed it well. I think the players managed it well. I never felt it really prevented them from winning 50-plus games. I don't know. How do you feel about injuries and also where this team is with Trey sidelined for a bit?
I would agree with Jim. It's just disappointing because he's not able to finish camp and get into the groove. And look, if there's a silver lining, and there's never, good news when you're talking about an injury, it's now, and it's not in April or in March when you're really going to count on him down the stretch to be an integral part of the team when you're talking about big ball games. And like Jim said, I mean, he missed 19 games to start the season last year. You would hope that that number is going to be reduced significantly with the hamstring. Because remember, last year he was coming off a meniscus injury, which he had off-season surgery. So you would think that the amount of games he's going to miss early on in the season isn't going to equal what happened last year. Also, look, I know every game's important, but the early stages of the schedule for the Pelicans you would call manageable. It's not really the gauntlet that you're going to see later on in December and January. So I think you can maneuver the first couple of weeks without Trey. Hopefully by that time he'll be back and ready to go. The thing that's going to hurt without him in the lineup for those early games is his height. And I mean, we've been talking the entire week about, the Pelicans are going small, but rebounding is going to be such a factor for this team. And when you're missing 6'10", and he's capable, that's where I think it's really going to hurt. I think we could make it up as far as the shooting, no question about it. But you can't replace 6'10", and that to me is going to be the most concerning thing heading into the regular season, depending on how many games he's not going to be available.
Graf, you mentioned the 3-point shooting and the void that he leaves when he's not in the lineup. He made 169 threes last year out of the team's 1,023. I know we don't want to get too much into the math here, Gus, but he made 17% of the team's threes last season. So that's a pretty decent chunk, even though he basically played 2/3 of the season if you factor in the amount of games that he missed. But I think guys there's a couple other guys on the team that can make up for some of that. If you look at 3-pointers made per 36 minutes to kind of equalize everything based on playing time being different from different guys, Matt Ryan made the most threes per 36 minutes with 3.8. So, I mean, there's a couple other – Trey was 3.6. So there's a couple other guys that are probably going to have to step into that role and be able to make up for some of the threes. Because as we talked about the other day, Pelicans were 4th in 3-point percentage, but 24th in makes per game. So not having Trey, like you said, Todd, hopefully he'll only be out for a little while. But if he is out for a few games, there might be some other guys that play more minutes and can become the 3-point threat that he is on a nightly basis.
Todd, I don't know if this is a silver lining, but when I look at the first, 5 games that the Pelicans have, because again, 3 weeks reevaluation period puts it around when the season starts on the 23rd. You host the Bulls. Then the team goes out to the West Coast and they play a back-to-back baseball series, Graf, to use your favorite sports term here. Trailblazers for 2, Warriors for 2, and that brings the end of October. The last game against the Warriors is the day before Halloween, before, moving on. And it's really not until about the second week or so that I guess the team faces length and height and things in nature. So I don't know if it's a silver lining, because you bring up a great point about rebounding and stuff like that. But when you think of Trailblazers, when you think of Warriors and the Bulls, is that a team that presents challenges with height, with rebounding?
Not per se, especially Golden State. They Kuminga's really been a force for them, rebounding the ball. It's just difficult with Portland, because look, Portland's got DeAndre Ayton, and he has been a menace to the Pelicans over the last few years. And here's the other thing too, and I know Jim would agree. When we played Portland in the last couple of years, it's been down the stretch, and they have basically tanked the season. This is going to be the first time we're going to play Portland with a full complement of players, because you're not tanking in the opening week. Mm-hmm. We're going to play them at full strength unless something happens, during training camp for them or in the preseason. So while I said, you're not going through the major gauntlet and the schedule looks a little doable, especially early, Portland's going to be really tough at home in that first week of the season. Golden State's always tough at home. So while I think it's manageable, I think it's definitely going to be more difficult early in the season than it would be in early April when none of the Trailblazers frontline guys were playing. Golden State's going to play their guys as well. So, look, we talk constantly about it. Every game is going to be important. You never know which game is going to be the difference in seeding. So you have to approach each game like you got to come out 100% and try to get a W.
Yeah, Portland, I think a lot of people are going to pick, or right now are picking 14th or 15th in the West, but I think that speaks more to how brutal the West is than necessarily their situation. I mean, like you said, we're going to see a lot more proven NBA players in their lineup at the beginning of the season. Last couple of years, they kind of somewhat shut it down in February, March, and there's a bunch of guys that are really more fringe NBA players. So you're right. That's going to be interesting to watch that series, and the two games against the Warriors too, I think are going to be could be like a small lineup festival where you see both teams. Right. So I think that matchup will be really interesting as well, but it definitely hurts to not have Trey from his size, not just the rebounding, but the ability to switch on defense. I think the Pelicans won't be able to do that as well without him on the court.
That's a very good point. All right, let's get to what you guys have been able to see, and I got a good chance to see here as well. Training camp wraps up over the weekend. Todd, it was funny. We were talking with Antonio Daniels waiting to go into a practice earlier this week, and he's like, man, camp used to be, what was it, like 22 a day? A month or 2 a day, so it's a little different. That said, just your overall thoughts, and then, Jim, you can follow up with, what's your experience been like seeing this team in Nashville for, the week before they come home?
I mean, me personally, now look, the Pels are here in Nashville because the facility on Airline is under construction. So logistically, it would have been impossible to have a training camp in New Orleans. But I always like to see these camps go out of town. I got to go to Irvine for a month with the Saints back in August, and I thought it was really, really good. They got a lot of work done, not comparing football and basketball, but you're able to kind of put yourself in a cocoon, and it's all about the team. You're in the hotel, you're going to the facility at Belmont, and you're coming back, and you're always together. I think it's a really good team bonding deal. And I mean, we've seen the practices, guys. They've been very intense. It's very competitive, and that's what you want. So, I mean, I've had a good time watching this group, and you gotta get a lot of work done in a very short amount of time, because, like you said, Gus, I mean, Sunday is the last practice, and then it's game time on Monday, and it's time to kind of see what you felt out here in the week of training camp. But I was, pretty pleased with what I saw.
I've been really interested in and enjoyed watching some of the combinations of players and lineups that they've had on the court. I really have watched Dejounte Murray and seen the way that he not only interacts with players off the court, but the way he sees the floor and he finds guys cutting to the basket. It's been fun watching Brandon Ingram. It seems like he's played really well. Jose Alvarado. I'm afraid to start listing people because I feel like I'm going to forget some guys that have played really well. But I mean, there's been a bunch of guys that stand out a ton. And based on what we've seen this week, I'm really we always look forward to the preseason opener to some extent, but I'm really looking forward to Monday just based on being able to see a bunch of these guys against another NBA team.
Yeah.
The entire preseason is going to be intriguing. And look, there's a guy preseason, blah, blah. It really means something for the Pels because you've got a lot of combinations and you got to figure out, who can play with each other. So these 4 preseason games are going to be pretty important when you're talking about preparation for the regular season.
This is also the first time since 2021 where there's a bunch of new guys on the roster. Right. They really had a lot of continuity the last 2 years where you brought back when you bring back most of the same guys, there's not nearly as much to watch for in preseason because you've already seen kind of and heard the song played before. But I think the fact that they added a bunch of guys to the roster makes this a little bit more unique, and it might be more interesting to watch the games.
Trey Murphy's post-practice presser earlier in the week, I think, said it best. He said he'd had a couple of camps. He's not a grizzled vet of 10, 15 years, Graf, but he said he hadn't seen that kind of start since he's been here and that competitiveness here as well. I think he says it best because what I took away out of it and what I've been telling people, and I sat with, JD, Todd, back here in the office, and I was like, look, the things that stood out to me is that looked like a team. It looks like a team that is good, that should have won 50 games. And Jim, to your point, it's interesting because it do have some new pieces, but it's almost felt like it's seamlessly gone in. Now, I know they haven't played a game, but to your point, it looks like Dejounte helps this team, makes them a little bit better. I've said a lot since I've been back, Todd. I think people are really going to like what Daniel Tice, brings to this team. To your point, we hadn't even got to like guys like, Kane or Green and other guys that are new to this roster. And I know there was sort of like, man, you lost Najee, you lost Larry Nance. How's that going to go? I don't know, Todd, you know the players that are new better than most because you've covered them on other teams. But don't you feel like they've done a good job of finding guys that are going to help this team, and they seem to have meshed already with it?
Yeah, look, and I think one of those players, like you mentioned, was Javonte Green. And, you see him up close, and it's like, well, he's really not that big. He's 6'4", 6'5", tops. But, Jim made a great point when we were watching him the other day. It's like he plays a lot bigger than the 6'4", 6'5". And he is going to be really, really good defensively. And I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to be in the rotation, at least in the first couple of weeks, just to see what's going on when the team is really starting to find itself. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's impossible right now, Gus, to, with the new pieces. All right, here we go. We're ready to go. It's going to be a process. It really is. So, but I just watching Green's been interesting. We've talked constantly about what Dejounte Murray is going to bring to the table. Daniel Tice is going to be very intriguing as well, just because of the role they're going to ask him to be. Is he going to be a 5? Is he going to be a 4? Where are they going to position him on the floor? Mm-hmm. Just those types of things are questions that aren't going to be answered in the first 1, 2, 3 weeks of the season. That's what the 82 games are for. But you definitely got some pieces where you think that, okay, because you have the core, who the core group is, the 30-minute six, as David Griffin called them, back on media day. You've got those guys. Obviously Trey's going to be out a little bit, but he'll be back and he'll be playing meaningful minutes. It's just a process right now, and it's trial and error, and hopefully they can get some wins while they're figuring out all these combinations that Willie Green's going to have to put together on the floor for 48 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things, Todd, you said we were there in Nashville for a while. Willie Green's going to have his challenges. All right, so let's transition to the first opportunity that we all will get to see him at the same time in a game. That is the preseason opener on Monday. Smoothie King Center. It's the only one that's going to be in town. Not a lot of preseason games, so it's not like, they're not skipping here or anything from that nature, but it's the only one that's going to be in New Orleans, and that is a 12:30 tip, an early tip. Big day here in New Orleans. You got the Saints taking on the Chiefs Monday Night Football, but before that, we play hoops. Todd, I mentioned it earlier in some of the other podcasts as well. You've already started the homework on Orlando. This was a team last year when they met the Pelicans. Tough matchup, man. Just tough matchup. They're big. They're strong. Buccaro's the real deal, man. That's a good young team up and coming over in the East. So I am kind of curious to see how the Pels kind of go about it. It'd be a nice little, I guess, test to see about the whole small ball and everything. What's your overall thoughts as to what you want to see when the Pels take on the Magic on Monday?
It is a really, really tough matchup. I mean, the Pelicans have struggled against Orlando the last few seasons. Matter of fact, Orlando has won 7 straight games in New Orleans. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Wow. Did not realize that.
7 straight years. And they're starting to become a very good home team as well. But you talked about, the height disadvantage. We're going to be put to the test very, very early because remember, we're going right back to Orlando and playing them next Friday. It's been 2 consecutive games against this team. But, their starting lineup last year, they lost in the first round to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Orlando took them to 7 games in the first round of the playoffs. Orlando was a 5 seed last year. They increased their win total by 13, which was tops in the Eastern Conference. And again, we saw them up close and personal, and it was just difficult. I mean, Banchero was outstanding, former Rookie of the Year. He's talked a lot in the preseason how their goal this year is to make the Eastern Conference Finals.
Wow.
They've got the talent to do it. The thing is, they're very, very young, but now they've got playoff experience, and they won a lot of games last year. They won 47 games. Jalen Suggs is as good as it gets as far as a point guard. We talked about Banchero. Jonathan Isaac is long and lean. He's at 6'10". Wendell Carter Jr., the Pelican killer who averages a double-double every time he plays against us, it seems. But they've also got a couple of veterans that they signed in the offseason. Contavious Caldwell-Pope came over from Denver, signed a 3-year deal as a free agent. This is a world champion with the Nuggets. They're going to put him into the starting lineup. And he's just a really intelligent basketball player who is really defensive-minded. This was the third-rated defense in all of basketball a year ago. They're not really out to bludgeon you point-wise. They're going to defend. And they were almost, I think, second to last in three-point attempts last year. They don't want to beat you with the three. They want to beat you with defense because they got enough scoring. I mean, we mentioned Banchero, but Franz Wagner is as good as it gets. You forget about him. I mean, this is another starter. So I think right out of the gate, the Pelicans are going to be really tested, even though the games don't mean anything. But you're talking about small ball, what the Pelicans want to do against a team this size. You're going to see 2 games in a row, and you're going to figure out if small ball works really quickly.
Yeah, Graf, my biggest team overall storylines, you kind of alluded to it in several ways. Rebounding, I think, is going to be the thing that I want to keep the closest eye on in Monday's game as well as Friday. It's kind of cool that they're playing the same team twice because we're going to be able to look at, I mean, they're not going to go too in depth into the scouting report and that kind of thing, but, maybe just different adjustments or even maybe more so different things that you didn't do so well Monday that you're going to try to improve upon on Friday and see how they do in that category, in some of those categories. But Orlando was 4th in rebounding percentage last season. So they're one of the best rebounding teams in the league. Pelicans were 10th. So I'm curious to see how the Pelicans can hold their own in that part of the game against the Magic. Like you said, Graf, they're kind of like a late 90s, early 2000s type team where, you don't shoot a lot of threes, but your success is based a ton on what you do in the paint, what you do defensively and rebounding wise. So that part of it, I think, it's kind of, I think it might be helpful and instructive for the Pelicans to play against this kind of team in preseason.
Yeah, and they were also first in the league in free throw attempts at over 24 a game. So what they don't make up shooting the ball, they get to the line early and often, and that's how they can get some cheap points as well.
All right, let's wrap up with a player or two that you want to keep your eye on. I'm going to make it real easy for you guys. For me, it's Dejounte Murray. I can't wait for the chance to see this guy. I couldn't wait to see him in training camp, and I was not disappointed. I think that he is perfect for this fan base. The fans are just going to eat this guy up, his attitude, his personality, and what he's going to be able to add to Brandon Ingram's game, to Zion's game, and everybody else. So, you know what? Y'all can have it after that. But for me, Monday, 12:30, my eyes will be glued to the starting point guard of your Pelicans.
Jim, you go next because I know we're going to be on the same wavelength with this. So I'm going to let you go first.
I mean, Gus took my number 1 pick, that's cool. I totally understand it.
I mean, but that's just obvious.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer.
I am Captain Obvious.
Let's think outside yes, you are. Let's think outside the box here.
I'm going with Jordan Hawkins, actually, because I want to see – I thought he had a really good training camp and see him carry that over. It seems like the other players to the media have said some positive things about how he looks, and Jordan himself mentioned that he feels like the game is – slowed down a little bit and that he's adjusted well. We see a lot of players make some big jumps from their first to second year. So this is going to be the first chance we get to see what Jordan Hawkins, NBA sophomore, looks compared to how he was as a rookie. I mean, just on this roster, Trey Murphy is a guy I think think about the difference between him as a rookie and in his second year. So I'm excited to watch Jordan Hawkins all season, but also on Monday against Orlando to see, what his role is. Maybe he plays a little bit more minutes unfortunately with Trey out, but he's my pick. The floor is yours, Todd.
All right. Well, I had a 1A and 1B, and Jordan Hawkins was 1B, so we really were on the same wavelength. I'm going with Matt Ryan, who is 1A, especially now that we know that Trey's not going to be here. Matt Ryan has worked with what you would call the first unit pretty much the entire camp, wearing that blue jersey. So how he is going to be integrated, what is the combination of other players are going to be on the court with him, but you're going to have to make up Trey's three-point shooting somehow. And I think you would both agree, watching every practice so far, that Matt Ryan has been outstanding shooting the basketball during this training camp. Mm-hmm. So is Jordan Hawkins, for that matter.
Sure.
Other than the first day, where everybody kind of was breaking the rust off. But Matt Ryan has been outstanding. And there was a reason he was wearing that blue jersey the entire camp, because he was that effective. So is he going to be able to step his game up a little bit more and get in there and rebound a little bit? That remains to be seen. But as far as shooting the basketball, I'm very comfortable with him parking in the corner and just draining 3 after 3.
I think another thing, too, that we can wrap up with is fans are going to get to see what we saw in Nashville. Brandon Ingram's going to launch those threes, man. He's going to.
That was another one.
Threes.
That was 1C. That was 1C. Is Brandon Ingram going to continue into these preseason games what we have watched all week?
I'll go with, if I get a second pick, I'll go with Daniel Tice, kind of along the lines of Dejounte Murray.
That was 1D.
Man, you got a lot of letters under your one here, Graf.
Well, I mean, it's just hard to pinpoint one player, because there's just so much.
That's a good thing. Isn't that a good thing?
Out. I agree. No, I agree.
And my 1K, no, just kidding. My 1K was
1E. It would be 1E.
Okay, 1E was cheating a little bit and saying all of the backup bigs beyond Daniel Tice, between EC, Carlo Makovic, are both rookies. Trey Jemison, this is his second year. By the way, of the Pelican centers, little trivia here, of the 4 centers of the guys that I listed, Trey Jemison has made the most NBA starts over the last 2 seasons, with 14 with Memphis last year. So just a little footnote you can impress your friends with.
Here's my footnote. Here's my 1 GTA. Huh? See what I just did there?
Oh, 3 letters.
1 GTA.
Yes.
I think people are going to be very happy with the Jose Alvarado coming into this season. Would y'all agree?
100%. He's looked great
No doubt.
in training camp. Yeah.
He's a grizzled veteran now. It's hard to believe, but he is. I mean, and look, when Dejounte Murray, has to go to the bench and get a breather, I have, and I know you both would agree, you have no qualms with Jose coming in and running the team for however many minutes he needs to run it. He just looks really, really comfortable now.
My last practice in Nashville, Todd, you were sitting to my right, and I looked at you. I said, is he the team's second best ball handler? And you said,
no doubt. No question.
There you go. So, well, all that remains now is for you guys to get home safely, and then we play some basketball. 12:30 on Monday at the Smoothie King Center. Jim will be there. Of course, the Graf will have the call on our brand new flagship and on the Pelicans Radio Network, WWL, man. I'm so excited about that as well. I sent you the photo of the banner. It's kind of cool to see inside the arena. The arena's ready to go. I know these guys are ready to go. Y'all go wrap up practice, and we'll see you soon, man. Thanks as always for your time.
Thanks, Gus.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.